chapter 2, part 9, verse 155. We shall certainly test you with fear and hunger and loss of property, lives and crops. Give good news to those who endure with fortitude. Verse 156. Those who say, when afflicted with a calamity, we belong to God, and to Him we shall return. Verse 157. Are the ones who will have blessings and mercy from their Lord. It is they who are on the right path. During our effort to build new religion with different set of ideologies, we faced plenty of resistance from the people with traditional mindset, and had to suffer a lot. To keep my followers encouraged during this period of hardship, I had to show them incentives. Hence I declared that these people would receive blessings and guidance from universal God. Verse 158. Safa and Marwa are among the symbols set up by God. There is nothing wrong if anyone goes on a pilgrimage to the house, or performs a minor pilgrimage in walking to and fro between them. Of anyone who does good of his own accord, God is appreciative and aware. There are the two little hills of Safa and Marwa now, absorbed in the city of Mecca, and close to the well of Zamzam. Here, according to my version of the biblical story, the lady Hagar, mother of the infant Ishmael, prayed for water in the parched desert, and in her eager quest round these hills, she saw the Zamzam spring. Pagan Arabs had placed a male and a female idol here. They felt some hesitation in going round these places during the Hajj pilgrimage at a later stage. Brother Andrew described history of Hajj and Safa and Marwa as below in his post. Muslims claim Muhammad performed the Hajj, but truth says otherwise. Muslims today make great boasts of how Islam is the purest monotheistic religion on the planet. Yes, Islam is a monotheistic religion, but then again, Pharaoh Akhenaten was also the inventor of a monotheistic religion in 1362 BC. But what Muslims don't realize is that all their rituals of the Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca, where they circle the black stone 7 times etc., are of purely pagan origin. Although Muslims will claim that these rituals were practiced by Adam, Noah, and Abraham as Muslims perform them today, this is nothing but pure myth, totally unsupported by history. In fact, the Hajj is documented in history as being solely of Arab pagan origin. Muslim myth says that Abraham performed the Hajj, but it was corrupted down through the ages, and then Muhammad came along and restored it to its original purity. But this also is myth because the history of the Hajj has only a pagan history before Muhammad. It is clear that Muhammad took these pagan practices and assigned them new meanings never before imagined. The Arabs have perpetuated these myths ever since, even though history proves otherwise. Note, these quotes below are in no particular order. 1. We used to consider that is going around them a pagan custom of the pre-Islamic period of ignorance, so when Islam came, we gave up going around them. Then Allah revealed verily, Safa and Marwa, that is 2 mountains at Mecca, are among the symbols of Allah. So it is not harmful of those who perform the Hajj of the house of Allah, or perform the Umrah, to ambulate between them. Please refer Hadith, al-Bukhari Volume 6, Book 60, number 22 and 23. 2. Regarding the 2 little hills of Safa and Marwa, unfortunately the pagan Arabs had placed a male and a female idol here, and their gross and superstitious rites caused offense to the early Muslims. They felt some hesitation in going round these places during the pilgrimage. As a matter of fact, they should have known that the Kaaba had been itself defiled with idols and was sanctified again by the purity of Muhammad's life and teaching. Please refer the Holy Quran, text, translation, and commentary by Abdullah Yusuf Ali. First published in the year 1938, edited in the year 1973, page 62, footnote 160, commenting on verse 2 by 158. 3. Ibn al-Arabi reports from Ibn Sahab that Urwa said, I asked Aisha, what is your view of verse 2 by 158? There shall be no blame on him who performs tawaf between Safa and Marwa. Surely there can be no blame on anyone who does not perform this tawaf. Aisha replied that were the case as Urwa supposed, the verse would read, there shall be no blame on him who does not perform the tawaf. The Ansar, feeling certain scruples about this ceremony on account of the locality's former association with idols, consulted the Prophet. God revealed in verse 2 by 158. The Prophet then laid down the sunnah of performing the tawaf. It is thus incumbent upon pilgrims not to omit it. Please refer Abu Bakr Muhammad b. Abdullah b. al-Rabi, Ahkam al-Quran, 4 volumes, Volume 1, page 46, quoted by John Burton, The Collection of the Quran, page 12. 4. One of the companions said to Anas ibn Malik, "Did you used to hate running between the Safa and Marwa?" He said, "Yes, because it was part of the pre-Islamic rituals, until God gave Muhammad this verse, and proclaimed that it was also one of God's ceremonial rites." Please refer to Sahih al-Bukhari, Volume 2, page 195. 5. Narrated Ibn Abbas, to run along the valley between two green pillars of Safa and Marwa was not sunnah, but the people in the pre-Islamic period of ignorance used to run along it, and used to say, "We do not cross this rain stream except running strongly." Please refer Hadith al-Bukhari, Volume 5, Book 58, number 186. 6. Narrated Urwa, I said to Aisha, the wife of the Prophet, and I was at that time a young boy, "How do you interpret the statement of Allah, verily, Safa and Marwa, that is 2 mountains at Mecca, are among the symbols of Allah? So it is not harmful of those who perform the Hajj to the house of Allah, or perform the Umrah to ambulate or tawaf between them. In my opinion it is not sinful for one not to ambulate between them." Aisha said, "Your interpretation is wrong, for as you say, the verse should have been, so it is not harmful of those who perform the Hajj or Umrah to the house, not to ambulate between them." This verse was revealed in connection with the Ansar, who during the pre-Islamic period used to visit Manat, that is an idol, after assuming their ihram, and it was situated near Qudayd, that is a place at Mecca, and they used to regard it sinful to ambulate between Safa and Marwa after embracing Islam. When Islam came, they asked Allah's apostle about it, whereupon Allah revealed, "Verily, Safa and Marwa are among the symbols of Allah. So it is not harmful of those who perform the Hajj of the house of Allah, or perform the Umrah to ambulate between them." Narrated Asim bin Sulaiman, I asked Anas bin Malik about Safa and Marwa. Anas replied, "We used to consider that as going around them a custom of the pre-Islamic period of ignorance, so when Islam came, we gave up going around them. Then Allah revealed, "Verily, Safa and Marwa are among the symbols of Allah. So it is not harmful of those who perform the Hajj of the house of Allah, or perform the Umrah to ambulate between them." Please refer verse 2 by 158 and Hadith al-Bukhari Volume 6, Book 60, number 22 and 23. 7. Narrated Asim, I asked Anas bin Malik, "Did you used to dislike to perform tawaf between Safa and Marwa?" He said, "Yes, as it was of the ceremonies of the days of the pre-Islamic period of ignorance, till Allah revealed, 'Verily, the 2 mountains, as Safa and al-Marwa, are among the symbols of Allah. It is therefore no sin for him who performs the pilgrimage to the Kaaba, or performs Umrah, to perform tawaf between them." Narrated Ibn Abbas, Allah's apostle performed tawaf of the Kaaba and the Sa'i of Safa and Marwa so as to show his strength to the pagans. Please refer Hadith al-Bukhari, Volume 2, Book 26, number 710 and 711. 8. The demons in the Jahiliyyah used to circumnavigate all night around these 2 mountains. The idols were erected between them. When Islam came, Muslims said, "O Apostle of God, we would never run between the Safa and Marwa, because this is an unfavorable matter which we were accustomed to do in the Jahiliyyah." Thus, God gave this verse. Refer to as Bab al-Nuzul by Suyuti, page 27. 9. As Afanayla, the former the image of a man, the latter of a woman, were also 2 idols brought with Habal from Syria, and placed the one on Mount Safa and the other on Mount Marwa. Please refer Preliminary Discourse to the Quran, Sale, page 22, year 1801. 1. The Ramil Jimr ceremony at Mina, like many other ceremonies in the Hajj, places a great emphasis on stones, further evidence of pagan Arab practices surviving to this day, for the pre-Islamic idol worshippers worshipped not only stones, but had a stone-throwing ceremony in their rites. Please refer Muhammad and the Religion of Islam by John Gilchrist, year 1984. 2. The custom of stone-throwing has of old maintained itself outside the Mina Valley, where Islam has legalized the throwing onto 3 stone heaps. Please refer Mecca in the latter part of the 19th century. Hergrange, page 96, quoted in Muhammad and the Religion of Islam, John Gilchrist. 3. At the small village of Mina, each pilgrim must, on the third day of the Hajj, cast 7 small pebbles at a stone pillar known as Jamrat al-Aqaba, as a sign of his rejection of the ways and influence of the devil. For this reason the pillar has become known as Shaitan al-Kabir, or the Great Satan. It used to be a simple pillar at ground level, but the crowds to Mecca being what they are these days, it is now a huge pillar with platforms at different levels to accommodate the hundreds of thousands of pilgrims who endeavor to pelt it. Each pilgrim must collect 63 small stones, while at Muzdalifah, 4, when the final tawaf is completed, he must return to Mina to once again stone the pillar as well as 2 others nearby, known as Jamrat al-Avla and Jamrat al-Wusta respectively. Though some gather only 49 stones and others 70. The number must be a multiple of 7, as 7 pebbles are to be cast at each pillar in turn. Like many other rites in the Hajj, this one too has been dislocated from its pre-Islamic pagan status, and is now said to be an act of piety which follows the example of Abraham, who supposedly thrice stoned Satan, as he tried to stop him sacrificing his son. Believed by the Muslims to have taken place in the valley where Mina is situated. Please refer Muhammad and the Religion of Islam by John Gilchrist. 1. Curious set of ceremonies of pagan Arab origin which Muhammad has incorporated into his religion. Please refer Hergrange, Mohammedanism, page 160. 2. The rites of the Kaaba were retained, but stripped of all idolatrous tendency, they still hang, a strange unmeaning shroud, around the living theism of Islam. Please refer the original sources of the Quran by William St. Clair Tisdall, year 1905. 3. Muslim scholars have also been constrained to admit that Muhammad adopted the pagan Arab pilgrimage en bloc into Islam, seeking to justify it on the historical fiction that Abraham was its originator, and that later generations perverted its monotheistic origin and emphasis. Please refer Muhammad and the Religion of Islam by John Gilchrist. 4. We cannot accept, however, the claim that the ceremonies as practiced today were first performed by Abraham. It is historically illogical to assume that they survived unchanged through centuries of pagan Arab custom while idol worship became the order of the day. The most probable reasons for Muhammad's acceptance of the Hajj ceremonies have already been given in this book. The honor bestowed on him before his mission, when he was appointed to replace the black stone in the Kaaba, and his constant search for a means whereby he might reconcile himself to his pagan countrymen. It is highly significant that Meccan opposition to Muhammad's cause collapsed immediately after he and his followers had performed the pilgrimage, the exact rites performed by the pagan Arabs, excluding the worship of their idols, a year after the Treaty of Hudaybiyah had allowed them to do so. Please refer Muhammad and the Religion of Islam by John Gilchrist. 5. It is, therefore, in these absurd rites of the Hajj that Islam finds its severest condemnation, and the falsity of Muhammad's pretended revelations is amply demonstrated. The Hajj was Muhammad's compromise with Arabian paganism. Please refer the Sources of Islam by Blair, page 162, quoted in Muhammad and the Religion of Islam by John Gilchrist. 6. Perhaps the greatest irony of this whole ceremony is that its origin should be attributed to Abraham, a man who, according to the Quran, detested idols made of stone, and destroyed them as mentioned in verse 37, by 91 to 93. For the whole emphasis of the pilgrimage falls on stones. The Muslims circumambulate the Kaaba, an empty shrine made of stones, kiss the black stone built into it, and pray at the Maqam Ibrahim, in front of which stands a small shrine containing another stone on which Abraham allegedly stood while building the Kaaba. It is supposed to bear his footprint. Arafat is a plain on which the Mount of Mercy stands, covered with stones, and a stone monolith commemorating Muhammad's farewell sermon. At Mina the pilgrims throw small stones at larger stone pillars. Surely it is almost ridiculous to believe that the great patriarch, the exemplar of true faith in those very early days, was the author of ceremonies whose rites were vested in stones, the very things from which the pagan idols were made. Please refer Muhammad and the Religion of Islam by John Gilchrist. 7. This last was a magnificent stroke of policy. besides satisfying his own insuppressible hankering after Mecca and its fetish, for it bound the Meccans and the Mecca-visiting Arabs to the new regime and faith, as nothing else could have done. Please refer The Reproach of Islam by Gardner, page 71, referring to Muhammad's choice to perform the pagan pilgrimage quoted in Muhammad and the Religion of Islam by John Gilchrist. 8. The Kaaba was then the holy of holies of paganism and securely protected against any attack against its authorities or sanctity. Please refer The Life of Muhammad by Haeckel, page 43, quoted in Muhammad and the Religion of Islam by John Gilchrist. 9. The Arabian situation was polytheistic at the time of the first surviving records of it. Please refer Britannica, Arabian Religions, page 1059, year 1979. 10. Commenting on the evolution of religion in Arabia, another significant change was that a monotheistic religion, with the Lord of heaven and earth as the sole God, had become the faith of the state. Formerly the religion of South Arabia had been basically stellar, with Aptar holding the senior place as the patron of land and agriculture and, in Maine, even of trade. Each state or tribe had its own moon god, under a national or local name. The temples had been centers of religious life, and the priests of the moon gods had normally provided oracle services. Pilgrimage had been performed to certain temples of the moon gods, with rituals similar in many details to those of the pre-Islamic and Islamic pilgrimage to Mecca. Minor deities of agriculture and irrigation had been known, especially in Saba, as well as house gods and genies. The tribe Emir had practiced a semi-monotheistic religion, that of Disamwi or Lord of Heavens. They worshipped no other god, although they paid homage to the gods of other communities in which they occasionally found themselves. The god's name resembles that of the Lord of heaven and earth of the monotheistic religion that emerged in the 5th century, but it is not known whether the latter developed from it. Please refer Britannica, Arabia, History of, page 1045, year 1979, 11. The question of pilgrimage, which was an element foreign to nomadic civilization and of a late date among Semitic peoples. Please refer Studies on Islam, edited by Merlin L. Swartz, Pre-Islamic Bedouin Religion, by Joseph Henninger, year 1981, page 3-22. 12. The Kaaba in Legend and Superstition. The alleged religion of Abraham gave a basis for the esteem in which the Muslims held the Kaaba. Legend attached itself to the Quranic statements and spun them out. As Snuckular Grange has proved in his Mecca Advanced Feast against Dozi's hypotheses. See his Israelilen in Mecca. There can be no question of a local Meccan tradition in this connection. There was, it is true, a local tradition, but it consists of semi-historical reminiscences of the last few centuries before Islam. But all that tradition relates regarding the origin of the Kaaba and its connections with biblical personages belongs to Islamic legend. Please refer First Encyclopedia of Islam by E. Jabril, year 1987, Islam, page 587-591. 13. On the other hand, Muslim legend has developed the passage, verse 3 by 90, truly, the first temple that was founded for men is that in Bakka, a blessed house, and a guidance for all creatures. The ambiguous expression according to which Ibrahim and Ismail raised the foundations of the Kaaba left room for the view that the foundations already existed on which he erected the building. Please refer First Encyclopedia of Islam by E. Jabril, year 1987, Islam, page 587-591. 14. This legendary story of the origin of the Kaaba was easily brought into conformity with the cosmological views current among Christians and Jews in the East, the central point of which was the sanctuary itself. Muslim tradition at first adopted this cosmology completely, as is evident from the statements which are still wholly under the influence of the predominance of Jerusalem. They were, however, not content with this and transferred a considerable part of these sayings to Mecca. Please refer First Encyclopedia of Islam by E. Jabril, year 1987, Islam, page 587-591. 15. The Islamic tradition furnishes several clues about the possible anthropological origins of the Kaaba. Like several other shrines in Arabia, it was part of a haram, or sacred area, where intertribal fighting was forbidden in order to facilitate trade. The temple was evidently at the center of a cult involving idol worship. The presiding deity was Hubble, a large carnelian statue kept inside the temple. 360 other idols were ranged outside. The three goddesses described in the Quran as the daughters of Al-Lat, Uzza, and Manat were also worshipped in the vicinity. By the Prophet's time, Christian influences were making themselves felt. Please refer Islam in the World by Malais Ruthven, year 1984, page 28 to 48. 16. Like the Quran itself, the earliest Muslim sources suggest that the pre-Islamic cult of the Kaaba had some astronomical significance. The historian Masudi stated that certain people had regarded the Kaaba as a temple dedicated to the sun, moon, and the 5 visible planets, making up the mystical figure of 7, the number of circumambulations required for each tawaf. The story that there were exactly 360 idols placed round the temple also points to an astronomical significance. Among the votive gifts said to have been offered to the idols were golden suns and moons. Please refer Islam in the World by Malais Ruthven, year 1984, page 28 to 48. 17. They may then drink and fill their jars with Zamzam water before proceeding to the Sa'i, running between the hillocks of Safa and Marwa in imitation of Hagar's plight. The whole distance, some 460 meters, has to be covered 7 times at something between a walk and a jog. Please refer Islam in the World by Malais Ruthven, year 1984, page 28 to 48. 18. The strain of performing the Sa'i, in which the pilgrim must travel some 3.5 kilometers, has been to some extent relieved by the architects, who have enclosed the whole passage inside a long air-conditioned gallery. The marble-flanked walkway includes a special corridor where the old, infirm or disabled can be pushed along in wheelchairs. Please refer Islam in the World by Malais Ruthven, year 1984, page 28 to 48. 19. The pilgrim who continues to make the Hajj, which only takes place at the appointed season, leaves the Haram area after performing the Sa'i and makes for the plain of Arafat, a vast natural amphitheater surrounded by hills about 11 kilometers from Mecca. Please refer Islam in the World by Malais Ruthven, year 1984, page 28 to 48. 20. Before the Saudis banned the use of private cars, the journey could amount to 10 or more hours of nightmarish struggle between traffic and pedestrians. In recent years, the Saudis have tried to alleviate the situation by banning vehicles carrying less than 9 passengers, but the confusion is still considerable. Please refer Islam in the World by Malais Ruthven, year 1984, page 28 to 48. 21. At Muzdalifah, the place where one makes oneself agreeable, the pilgrims collect the small pebbles, 49 in all, to be used in the most complicated and arcane of the Hajj ceremonies, the ritual stoning of the 3 pillars, or Jamarat, at Mina. The pebbles, each of which is supposed to be the size of a chickpea, are thrown in sequences of 7 at each of the 3 pillars situated about 300 meters apart along the road between Mina and Mecca, where a huge 2-tier walkway has been constructed enabling the people to stone the pillars from either level. The ritual is purely pagan, and there is no reference to it in the Quran. The pilgrims perform it only because, according to the Hadith traditions, the Prophet himself did so during his farewell pilgrimage. There is no mention in the canonical texts of the popular belief that the ceremonies involve the stoning of Satan. Nevertheless, the belief is held universally throughout the Muslim world and is said to account for the violence with which many pilgrims attack the pillars. Ali Shariati, the Iranian radical, gives the ceremony an unabashed revolutionary symbolism. These pebbles will be used as your weapons to kill your enemy. What does the pebble represent? It represents a bullet. Each soldier in Ibrahim's army has to shoot 70 bullets at the enemies in Mina. They are to be fired at the head, trunk, and heart of the enemy. Only those which hit the enemy will be counted. If you're not an expert, select more bullets to compensate for your lack of skill. If you hit one less than the recommended number, you are not considered a soldier, nor is your Hajj valid. Please refer Islam in the World by Malais Ruthven, year 1984. Page 28 to 48. 22. At Mina, the wastage of meat has up till now been appalling, since most of it has had to be destroyed in lime pits soon after the killing. Today, the Saudi authorities are investing in freezer plants and other ways of preserving the animal products. The animals are counted in sheep units, rating from 1 for a sheep or goat up to 7 for a fully grown cow or camel. In 1981, about 1 million sheep units were sacrificed, 70% of them during the first day of sacrifice, and of these, about half between morning and midday. Please refer Islam in the World by Malise Ruthven, year 1984, page 28 to 48. 23. The pagan background of all these rites, from the standing at Arafat to the Feast of Sacrifice, is still obscure. Muslim authorities are understandably reticent on the subject, while, for obvious reasons, archaeologists are unlikely to be admitted to the area in the foreseeable future. Please refer Islam in the World by Malise Ruthven, year 1984, page 28 to 48. 24. Some anthropologists have seen in the standing at Arafat relics of an ancient rainmaking. Please refer Islam in the World by Malise Ruthven, year 1984, page 28 to 48. 25. The Afat of front Arafat to Muzdalifah, which in pre-Islamic times began before nightfall, may have represented the persecution of the dying sun. The stone throwing at Mina, according to the earliest Muslim sources, only occurred after the sun had passed the meridian, suggesting a ritual pursuit of the sun demon, whose harsh rule ends with the summer. Please refer Islam in the World by Malise Ruthven, year 1984, page 28 to 48. 26. Just as the Quran did not suddenly appear out of nowhere in a strange and incomprehensible language, but was assembled from existing verbal materials, so the central ritual of Islam, the Hajj, was arranged out of existing cultic practices. The actions themselves were almost unchanged, but their meaning was transformed to fit a new, vastly expanded, cosmic vision. The result was a religious and ideological tour de force. By abolishing the intercalary month, Muhammad freed the rituals from their seasonal connections. From now on, the Hajj could fall at any time of the year, for the cosmic deity, to whom all the rituals were to be addressed, was the same God in autumn and spring, summer and winter. Similarly, the sanctuaries associated with particular localities were not abolished, but included within a set of rituals covering the whole area. The whole of Arafat is a place for standing, the whole of Muzdalifah is a place for stopping, the whole of Mina is a place for sacrifice. The Prophet is related to have said on the farewell pilgrimage. Similar effects were achieved by subtly adjusting the timing of the ancient ceremonies. Ancient taboos associated with the rituals were deliberately violated to demonstrate the impotence of the pagan gods and the inefficacy of the rituals when dedicated to them. But the forms of the rituals were preserved, because the Prophet was fully aware of the importance they held for his people. Beyond that, he knew that the rituals formed part of a universal language composed of bodily movements as well as verbal utterances, by means of which human beings express their deepest needs and apprehensions. The remarkable expansion of Islam, especially in the Far East and tropical Africa, long after its initial political and military impetus had exhausted itself, was in no small measure due to the ease with which it absorbed local cults, and then directed them towards the broader social and cosmological purpose of the monotheistic vision. Please refer Islam in the World by Malise Ruthven, year 1984, page 28 to 48. 27. But being constantly exposed to torrents, it was destroyed, and was rebuilt by Qusay ibn Kilab, who put a top to it. Up to this time it is said to have been open at the roof. Please refer a Dictionary of Islam by Thomas Patrick Hughes, year 1965, Kabda, page 256. 28. The roof was supported within by 6 pillars, and the statue of Hubble was placed over a wall then existing within the Kaaba. This took place during the youth of Muhammad. Al-Azraqi, quoted by Barakhart, says that the figure of the Virgin Mary and the infant Jesus was sculptured as a deity upon one of the 6 pillars nearest the gate. Please refer a Dictionary of Islam by Thomas Patrick Hughes, year 1965, Kabda, page 256. 29. According to the traditions and the inventive genius of Muslim writers, the Kaaba was first constructed in heaven, where a model of it still remains, called the Baytul el-Mamur, 2,000 years before the creation of the world. Adam erected the Kaaba on earth exactly below the spot its perfect model occupies in heaven, and selected the stones from the 5 sacred mountains, Sinai, Al-Judi, Hir, Olivet, and Lebanon. 10,000 angels were appointed to guard the structure, but, as Burckhardt remarks, they appear to have been often most remiss in their duty. At the deluge the sacred house was destroyed, but the Almighty is said to have instructed Abraham to rebuild it. In its reconstruction Abraham was assisted by his son Ishmael, who with his mother Hagar were at the time residents of Mecca, Abraham having journeyed from Syria in order to obey the commands of God. Upon digging they found the original foundations of the building, but wanting a stone to mark the corner of the building, Ishmael started in search of one, and, as he was going in the direction of Jabal Qubais, the angel Gabriel met him and gave him the famous black stone. Ibn Abbas relates that the Prophet said, "The black stone, when it came down from paradise, was whiter than milk, but that it has become black from the sin of those who have touched it." Please refer a Dictionary of Islam by Thomas Patrick Hughes, year 1965, Kabda, page 256. 30. The pagan Arabs practice polytheism. They worship nature, stones, angels and demons. Particular reverence was accorded the three daughters of God, and various national, local and family idols. Each tribe gave allegiance to a special protector, one god to whom it turned in time of distress. Our modern altars may have had their beginnings in the stone worship of the ancients. One stone still holds a revered spot in the Arab heart. This is the stone that fell from paradise at the fall of Adam. Pure white it was and housed in a temple built by Seth, Adam's son, until a great flood ravaged the land, destroyed the temple, and buried it under the mud and debris. Tradition relates that the stone remained hidden until Abraham sent his wife Hagar into the desert with their infant son Ishmael. One day, weakened by thirst, Hagar laid her baby on the sand to rest. His fitful thrashings uncovered a spring of clear water near the site of the lost relic. It is told that an angel descended from heaven and helped recover the sacred stone, and that Ishmael rebuilt the holy house of Seth with the assistance of Abraham and the archangel Gabriel. This, in brief, is the story of the Kaaba, holiest building in Islam. Please refer Islam and the Arabs by Ram Landau, year 1958, page 11 to 21. 31. It is clear from these and similar Quranic texts that the original pilgrimage rituals were not so much being described to Abraham, as alluded to for the benefit of a Meccan audience that was already quite familiar with them. It was once again left for later commentators to fill in the details, not of the Hajj, to be sure, which was well known to all, but of Abraham and Ishmael's connection with it. Please refer The Hajj by F. E. Peters, page 3 to 41, year 1994. 32. In this passage he describes how Abraham, at God's urging, performed that original pilgrimage ritual. Abu al-Walid related to us. From Uthman ibn Sa'd, Muhammad ibn Ishaq reported to me, when Abraham the friend of the Merciful finished building the sacred house, Gabriel came and said, "Circle it 7 times. And he circumambulated it 7 times with Ishmael, touching all the corners during each circumambulation. When they had completed 7, he and Ishmael prayed 2 prostrations behind the stone. He said, Gabriel got up with them and showed him all the ritual stations, Al-Safa, Al-Marwa, Mina, Muzdalifah, and Arafat. Please refer The Hajj by F. E. Peters, page 3 to 41, year 1994. 33. As these accounts attempt to demonstrate, the complex ritual the Muslims call the Hajj or pilgrimage can be traced back, in general and in each specific detail, to Adam, and, more proximately, to Abraham, whose intent and practices Muhammad was to restore so many centuries later. For the non-Muslim, however, the Meccan rituals are striking remnants of a pagan, albeit Semitic, past in Arabia, which the Prophet of Islam permitted to survive by incorporating them into his own prescriptions. Please refer The Hajj by F. E. Peters, page 3 to 41, year 1994. 34. It was the Zamzam, then, or perhaps the 2 high places called Safa and Marwa, that established the sanctity of the site of Mecca, though how long before QZE we cannot say. Please refer The Hajj by F. E. Peters, page 3 to 41, year 1994. 35. As for archaeological evidence, it is sparse indeed, particularly from Arabia, where excavation is still in its very early stage, and the sparse results are speculative in the extreme. Please refer The Hajj by F. E. Peters, page 3 to 41, year 1994. 36. In a chapter entitled The Building of the Kaaba by the Quraysh in the Age of Barbarism, the Meccan historian At-Siyaki collected some of the traditions still extant on the early appearance of the house, before its substantial reconstruction during the early manhood of Muhammad. Some men from Quraysh sat in the sanctuary and were remembering the building of the Kaaba, and they described how it was before that time. It was built of dried stones and not with clay or mud. Its door was on ground level and it had no roof or ceiling. The curtain was hung on its wall on one side and was tied to the top of the center of the wall. On the right as one entered the Kaaba, there was a pit where gifts of money and goods for the Kaaba were deposited. In this pit sat a snake to guard it, which God had sent at the time of the tribe of Jurhum. The horns of the ram that Abraham had slaughtered in place of Isaac or Ishmael were hanging on the wall facing the entrance. There were ornaments hanging in it which had been given as gifts. Tabari tells a story from Ibn Ishaq that casts a little more light on the earlier building. The reason for their demolition of the Kaaba was that at this time it consisted of loose stones rising to somewhat above a man's height, and they wished to make it higher and roof it over since some men, Quraysh and others, had stolen the treasure of the Kaaba, which was kept in a well in its interior. By this account the Kaaba does not appear to be a house at all but rather some kind of enclosure built around a pit or dry well, an enclosure that was, however, draped with a cloth curtain in a manner to give it the appearance of a tent. A tent-like structure makes more sense, and it has been plausibly suggested that the later cubiform stone building, the ancestor of the one that stands in Mecca today, succeeded a square or quadrangular tent, and so was distinguished from the round tents of the inhabitants of the settlement. The sequence would not be very different, then, from the Israelite one. The Ark of the Desert Wanderings continued to be housed in a tent even after its transfer to urban Jerusalem. Please refer Samuel verse 6:17. And when it was finally housed in a stone building, that Holy of Holies was likewise a Kaaba, 20 cubits in length and width and height. Please refer Kings verse 6:20 and the Hajj by F.E. Peters, page 3-41, year 1994. 37. Nor was Mecca's the only such building in Arabia. An early Muslim historian of the antiquities, Hisham ibn al-Kalbi, reported the presence of other Kaabas in and around the peninsula. The Banu al-Harith al-Bin Kab had in Najran a Kaaba which they venerated. The Iyad had another Kaaba in Sindad, which is located in a region between Kufa and Basra, in Iraq. Please refer the Hajj by F.E. Peters, page 3-41, year 1994. 38. We cannot say, then, how typical the obviously crude Meccan structure was. But whether typical or not, its primitive and makeshift architecture comes as no surprise. Not only was it situated in a wadi, and so vulnerable to the normal destructive consequences, but the Meccan Kaaba was also built to serve people who were originally nomads, and who had, even by the late 6th century, so little skill at construction, that they required the assistance of a foreign carpenter to put a timber roof on the edifice. But for all that, it was a temple, and had all the primary characteristics of such: a quadrangular cell oriented to the cardinal compass points, a sacred rock and sacred spring, a characteristic haram with the usual privileges of the right of asylum, and so on. Please refer the Hajj by F.E. Peters, page 3-41, year 1994. 39. Although it is true that the primary liturgy connected with the Mecca building, the ritual circumambulation, was performed outside, there is almost no trace, either before or under Islam, of the notion that the interior of the Kaaba was in any way more sacred than the surrounding haram. Access to it was controlled, as we shall have many occasions to see, but exclusively, it would appear, on the grounds of political privilege. The Kaaba was not, then, a more sacred haram within the larger haram that surrounded it. Please refer the Hajj by F.E. Peters, page 3-41, year 1994. 40. According to Muslim tradition, this had been a part, though not a structural part, of the building from the beginning, that is to say, from Adam's original construction of the house of God. But the tradition also remembered that the stone had come from Abu Qubais, a mountain overlooking Mecca. The two strands of tradition were harmonized in an account whereby the stone was concealed on Abu Qubais during the era of the flood, when Adam's original Kaaba was destroyed and then restored to Abraham for inclusion in his version of the Kaaba. But the harmonization was not perfect. Other traditions recollected that the black stone, or at least its inclusion in the Kaaba, was of much more recent origin. Ibn Sa'd says that the Quraysh brought it down from Abu Qubais only 4 years before Muhammad's first revelation. In another account from al-Faqihi, it is traced back to the Quraysh's first reconstruction of the building, possibly at the time of Qusay. Please refer the Hajj by F. E. Peters, page 3-41, year 1994. 41. But if, as seems equally likely, the stone was originally one of the portable Betels of the early settlers at Mecca, its incorporation into the structure of the Kaaba, like the depiction of similar stones on the walls of temples at Madain Salah and elsewhere, would signal the decision of nomads to make a fixed settlement. Please refer the Hajj by F. E. Peters, page 3-41, year 1994. 42. It has been suggested, for example, that a low wall, and so the Hijra enclosure, once surrounded the Kaaba on all sides and marked the area within which the idols were worshipped through sacrifice, or more enticingly, but less convincingly, that the Hatim represents the remains of the apse of a Christian church oriented towards Jerusalem, which, it will be seen, was the direction in which once Muhammad prayed while he was still at Mecca. The word Hijra itself means inviolable or taboo, and it occurs once in that sense, in the Quran verse 6 by 137-139, in reference not to the area near the Kaaba, but to animals and crops earmarked as belonging to the gods, a sense that supports the contention that the Hijra, whatever its original extent, may have served as a pen for the animals destined for sacrifice to the idols around the Kaaba. Whether it was so used in Muhammad's own lifetime seems doubtful, however, at least on the evidence of the Muslim authorities. As the Hijra is portrayed in Muhammad's day, it was a place of common assembly, where political matters were discussed, or people prayed, or, as it appears. Please refer the Hajj by F. E. Peters, page 3-41, year 1994. 43. Al-Faqihi then records a tradition traced back to Ibn Abbas stating that there is an inscription on the Maqam saying, "This is the house of God. He put it on the quadrangles of his throne. Its sustenance will come from this and that. Its people will be the first to suspend its sanctity." Please refer the Hajj by F. E. Peters, page 3-41, year 1994. 44. If pilgrims are drawn to it, so too are historians, who see in the source called Zamzam a plausible explanation of why there was a sanctuary in the Wadi of Mecca in the first place. In the 19th century, Julius Wellhausen pronounced the Zamzam the only spring of Mecca, and so likely the origin of the holy place as well, as the city, and other authorities have generally been inclined to agree. There are problems, however. Other wells quenched Mecca, as Ibn Ishaq reveals when speaking of the Zamzam. Zamzam utterly eclipsed the other wells from which the pilgrims used to get their water, and the people went to it, because it was in the sacred enclosure, and because its water was superior to any other, and also, because it was the well of Ishmael, son of Abraham. Because of it the Banu Abd Manaf behaved boastfully towards the Quraysh, and the other Arabs. The Zamzam was not, then, unique, it was simply superior, and the basis of that superiority, leaving aside the debated question of the quality of its water, was that its origin went back to Abrahamic days, when, as we have seen, it was miraculously discovered and saved the life of Ishmael. Zamzam, it was argued, was thus mentioned in the Bible, particularly if one accepted its identification with the miraculous life-saving spring mentioned in Genesis verse 21 by 19. Please refer the Hajj by F. E. Peters, page 3-41, year 1994. 45. Safa and Marwa. This is as much as the Quran says. But the Muslim tradition offers two explanations for the practice, one pagan and one Abrahamic. As we have already seen, the latter simply identifies Hagar's frantic search for water for the infant Ishmael, with the ritual running between the hills, before her providential discovery of the Zamzam. What is obviously an older and more primitive explanation has to do with two humans named Azaf and Nila, members of the Jurhum. The Quraysh adopted Azaf, or Zaf, and Nila, by the place of Zamzam, sacrificing beside them. They were, originally, a man and a woman of Jurhum, who copulated in the Kaaba, so God transformed them into two stones. But God alone knows whether this is the truth. Despite Ibn Ishaq's explicit misgivings, the colorful story became current in the Muslim authors and has been the point of departure for a wide variety of attempts to explain the reality, Afani, behind the story, and its connection with the running ritual. The names, which have to do with stones, appear to be Aramaic rather than Arabic, and so have suggested foreign origins. What were transparently sacred stones, or perhaps stone idols? The Jurhum story may reflect an ideological myth, or be a distant echo of some form of ritual prostitution at the Kaaba or nearby, were originally worshipped atop the high places of Safa and Marwa, and then brought down somewhere in the vicinity of the Kaaba by Qusay himself. The circumambulation ritual continued to be performed at the two hills, but thereafter sacrifices were offered at the new sites of the idols. Please refer The Hajj by F. E. Peters, page 3-41, year 1994. End of Chapter 2, Part 9.